This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
And what I want to do today is to give you a sense of an exhibition that we held at Wellcome Collection a few years ago, but put it in the context of the origins and the development of this man, Edward Lovett, and his folklore collection. So, I'd like to begin with a quote from an article which was published in the journal Folklore in 1909. It is a common idea that few traces of folk beliefs can be found in great cities, but my own experience is that, at any rate, for the seeker after amulets, there is no better hunting ground than the hawkers' hand barrows in the poorest parts or slums of such dense aggregations of people as London. End quote. This is a quote from the folklorist Edward Lovett, whose collection of amulets, charms and talismans I'll be discussing today. Regularly in the field of material culture, objects are considered through their connections to social practices and beliefs. Given the theme of this conference, today I'll be assessing material from Lovett's collection to the different emotions which surround them. By tracing the emotional life of the objects collected by Lovett, from the fears they embodied to their owners, to the emotions Lovett expressed towards them, and finally to their use in a contemporary exhibition, I aim to describe a possible emotional biography of these objects. Edward Lovett was representative of many of the middle-class men and women who became involved in the growth of folklore studies in the late 19th century. Lovett was an amateur folklorist, working for much of his life as a cashier for the Royal Bank of Scotland in the City of London. He devoted his spare time to his folklore interests. He was a keen member of the nascent Folklore Society, a regular lecturer and author on the subject, and the collector of a large array of objects that he believed illustrated a survival of older beliefs and customs. What's notable about Lovett, as opposed to other folklorists of the period, is that he was particularly interested in representations of folkloric beliefs in urban areas, particularly in London. To Lovett, London was a repository of rural folk beliefs that had been brought into the city by migrants from the countryside. These beliefs were manifested through objects which their owners believed offered them protection and good fortune, and it was such objects that Lovett collected. As a summary of his life stated, he walked through the slums of Edwardian and Victorian London, buying strange objects from sailors and barrowmen. Such objects ranged from cheap mass-produced items to items that were adapted from the original purpose and altered, for example, by inscription. Many operated through what was being categorised by James Fraser during this period as sympathetic magic. At an emotional level, there's an intimate relationship between owner and object, with many of the objects being handled or worn, or generally hidden from public view and kept close to the body. Indeed, the longer the item was worn, seemingly the more powerful the object was. Some examples taken from Lovett's summation of his collecting practice in the capital, Magic in Modern London, will help to flesh the summary out. A pock-marked piece of coral, similar in feel to damaged skin, was said to help lessen the chances of catching smallpox. Moles' feet were carried as a cure for cramps. Horseshoes tied above beds were said to stop children having nightmares, and a range of herbal remedies were employed for different curative purposes. So this is an image of orris root, which was said to, well, it was used to aid the teething of Jewish babies in the East End of London. In one account offered by Lovett, a fearful mother was advised by him to cut hair from her daughter, who was ill with whooping cough. The hair was put between two bits of bread and thrown onto the street, where it was eaten by a dog. When Lovett next visited the family, the child had recovered. The health of the dog was not recorded. And here's actually some bread that was supposed to be part of the sort of dog's hair sandwich. The three items in the bottom left, bottom right and top right are from collections of the Cumming Museum in South London. However, the best example from Lovett's collection of this intermingling of medical fears with tactile objects are a series of golden necklaces. In 1914, Lovett learned from the medical inspector of schools, the Urban District Council of Acton, of children wearing necklaces consisting of blue glass beads to ward off bronchitis. Lovett followed up this information by travelling to the East End. There, one of his contacts, a shop owner, revealed she herself wore one of these necklaces. Lovett obtained the following information, that the necklaces, quote, must never be taken off, even to wash the child. They are often worn a whole lifetime, only being removed to renew the string if broken or rotten, and that the wearers had, quote, a profound confidence in them as a cure for bronchitis. Lovett investigated in 26 districts in London, drawing up a map of his travels, recording the shops where he was offered one of these necklaces for sale when he said he wanted something to cure a child suffering from bronchitis. The shops were, quote, poor class shops where they sold cheap confectionery, buttons, tapes, pins and beads, end quote. His search for the necklaces also resulted in this visual representation of his travels. So he had different parts of London also marked up here with the dots being the shops he bought the necklaces in. Tantalisingly, in his book Magic in Modern London, Lovett states he is evident of the beaded necklaces being worn outside of London in such towns and cities as Newcastle, Cardiff and Ramsgate, but he does not elaborate upon this. As for their origin, a contact of Lovett's relates to him they were originally manufactured in Austria and shipped to London at very low cost. Such charm necklaces have a longer history in London than perhaps Lovett was aware of. Studies, particularly by Francis Doherty, have drawn out the history of the anodyne necklace from the early 18th century, marketed initially to aid teething, and so in contemporary understanding to lessen the chances of infant mortality. And it's worth pointing out as well that when we heard about the Foundling Hospital earlier on, the exhibition that was there, the Threads of Feeling exhibition, there were actually some blue bead necklaces there, suggesting sort of relevance years gone past to the ideas that Lovett was talking about as well. Aside from the amulets to protect against ill health, Lovett described and collected materials which could be said to work against other afflictions, which would traditionally be seen to be more emotional in their conception. In particular, Lovett comments on the use of plants as love remedies. For instance, dragon's blood, which was a nickname for the resin from the dracena tree, was sold by East End herbalists as a love filter. The notion being it would be offered by girls to boys who they had a crush on, drink the filter and the boy instantaneously fell for the girl. Similarly, the root of the tormental plant was sold by herbalists to girls, the belief being that the root, burnt at midnight, would induce such strong torment on an ex-boyfriend that he would soon return to his sweetheart. Similarly, Magic in Modern London features many accounts of tokens, charms and small mascots carried by soldiers for good luck during World War I. And I've chosen this image to represent that. I couldn't find anything historical, so I've chosen something from Series 2 of Downton Abbey. So we have Lady Mary passing on to her cousin Matthew a small toy that she was that meant an awful lot to her. And if we know anything of Downton Abbey, the miraculous recovery Matthew had in that series obviously comes from the small toy she passed on to her. Okay. Aside from their emotional values, Lovett's collection and his accounts of life in the poorer areas of Edwardian London also offer a source for attitudes towards health held by contemporary Londoners, which contrasts with the preventative authorities. For example, reading Lovett's account of a street barrowman spitting for luck on a coin he was giving back to Lovett as change brings to mind the accounts from municipal medical authorities decrying some poorer Londoners for their inability to alter attitudes, sanitation and infectious disease. In his writings, Lovett frequently stressed the secretive and intimate nature of his collecting. As opposed to other contemporary collectors, Lovett's collections were amassed through purchases he himself made from costermongers and shops in the poorer districts of London. He also claimed it was very difficult to talk to the, quote, barrow class about their beliefs. In Lovett's words, it is one of the prime rules of superstition that it is very unfortunate to speak about it. As such, Lovett made it clear that the sheer fact that he was able to speak to the poorer classes about their beliefs and collect material from them illustrated his expertise and skill as a folklorist. How much emotional investment did Lovett have in his collection? Lovett was very keen to promote himself, and from surviving correspondence, there is a sense of him using his collection to enhance his status and recognition as an expert on folklore. As such, he passed on to different museums a great number of pieces from his collection during his lifetime, often with the caveat that it should be clear that he was the donor to the museum, so when it's being displayed it's very much from Edward Lovett's collection. Indeed, after an initial loan period when they were exhibited, Lovett sold around 400 amulets, including examples of the blue beaded necklaces, to the Wellcome Historical Medical Museum in 1916, with clear instructions as to how this collection was to be preserved. And this is an image of a booklet from 1916. This was an exhibition that the Historical Medical Museum had of Lovett's a lot of amuletic material there. And this is one of the rare examples of an exhibition in the Wellcome Museum at that time from material being loaned to it. So it says something about the relationship Lovett had with the Wellcome at that time. This is a slightly different conception to the popular image of the collector as hoarder. With Lovett, we have a collector with a more dispassionate, less emotional relationship to his collection. Indeed, we have an instance of objects imbued with magical powers by their owners, becoming acquired by Lovett and being used to increase his social capital. With regards to the material Lovett sold to what was then the Wellcome Historical Medical Museum, he stressed the need to keep this collection together. He was assured this would be the case by the Wellcome curator he corresponded with, C.J.S. Thompson. However, this collection of amulets was, like the majority of objects that had entered the collections of Henry Wellcome, eventually dispersed at Wellcome's death. As has been discussed in the work of Jude Hill, the emotive power of the objects collected by Lovett are tempered by their current means of preservation. Due to climatic conditions, these objects, which, as we've noted, derive their power and significance from their tactile nature, and are usually encased in sealed plastic pockets in the museums in which they now reside. This clinical method of storage contrasts greatly with the original emotive power of the object, which often derived from its proximity to the skin. However, the emotional power of the Lovett collection lay at the heart of a recent temporary exhibition at Wellcome Collection, which sought to bring Lovett and the materials he collected to wider prominence. Entitled Charmed Life, the Solace of Objects, the exhibition consisted of a display of over 100 amulets and charms Lovett had collected, which then had been acquired by Henry Wellcome and later passed on to the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. Tellingly, Charmed Life was created by an artist, Felicity Powell, and the exhibition also featured artworks inspired by Powell's personal engagement with the collection. For example, a film showing Powell making wax miniatures inspired by the amulets emphasised her tactile encounter with the wax. So here's a shot of most of the spaces of the exhibition, and the room at the side was where the films Felicity had made were being shown. So note as well, almost the horseshoe size of the shape of the table where the amulets and other materials were displayed. The emotional aspect of the objects, how they embodied the fears and desires of their owners, was captured in the exhibition's promotional literature, which discussed how each of the objects was invested with the hope or belief that they could somehow mediate on behalf of their owner. This personal, intimate response to the exhibition was also brought out in a film to accompany it, which featured contemporary Londoners speaking about the personal items they believed brought them good fortune. Inadvertently, the film offered a neat parallel with Lovett's questioning of Londoners about such beliefs 100 years previously. For me, this personal relationship between owner and amulet is alluded to in the iPhone app produced as a legacy project for the exhibition, where users follow in Lovett's footsteps, tracing his amulets across London with their iPhones in hand. An inadvertent suggestion that for some contemporary Londoners, their iPhones held a similar emotional charge as amulets did for the Londoners Lovett collected from. Although not a stated aim of the exhibition, the display of amulets and charmed life showed the physical alterations of these objects as they passed from owner to collector to museum. This change of ownership is noticeable in the accession numbers inscribed onto the object. With regards to this object, The label marking its accession into Wellcome's collection dwarfs the actual coin collected by Lovett, and note the emotive word "Dad" etched onto the coin by its original owner. This paper is aimed to trace an emotional biography of the Lovett collection, showing how objects which embodied fears of illness and the personal desires of their owners came into the ownership of a collector whose feelings for his collections were also bound together with concerns of a personal prestige. These objects have recently been utilised to form the basis of an exhibition which at its core revolved around an emotional response by an artist-curator. By constructing this biography, I want to show how the Lovett collection adds weight to Faye Bound-Alberti's assertion that, quote, analysing emotions as experiences and representations situated in the practice of everyday life helps us to move away from the construction of emotions as abstract entities, end quote. Indeed, by following the life of these amulets from owner to collector to museum to display, I hope I've shown the different emotions imbued in and even inscribed upon these objects.